and fill out this sign-in form. That's this QR code right here. And then we're going to go ahead and get started for the evening. So if it'll go. Okay, so before we get started, everybody, I just wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a chance to kind of give recognition to the indigenous peoples that inhabited this land before us and acknowledge the history of colonization and oppression and understand that our place like occupying this land contributes to that today. So I just wanted everyone to kind of like take a moment to kind of consider that and recognize the Timucua Nation who was here before us, as well as the Seminole Nation. And we'll talk more about indigenous peoples and the Timucua tribe specifically later on in our presentation. So now we're just going to do a bit of introduction so you kind of know who's talking to you right now. So hello everybody, welcome. My name is Alex Hernandez. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the president for Pride Student Union. My team and I were responsible for putting together this special event, and we've been working for a very long time to get everything just right. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to pass it over to Nicole. Oh, actually, sorry. Before that, I'm a third-year student studying psychology here. I identify as queer and trans and non-binary, and I'm also Mexican-American, first-generation student. And I guess a fun fact about me is that I have a cat that I love very much. So, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nicole. I use she, her pronouns. I am an admin director under Alex's cabinet. I am a fourth-year health science major here at UF on the pre-med track and minoring in leadership. Let's see. I identify as bisexual and a white American. And a fun fact about me is that my favorite animal is a pig.
Ariel, you want to go next?
Hi everyone, my name's Ariel. I go by the pronoun she, her. I'm a lesbian and I identify as white and Middle Eastern and American. I'm majoring in psychology on the pre-law track, and I am very excited for this presentation. So I hope you all enjoy.
Thanks, and Diego?
Hi everyone, my name is Diego and I am a first year here at the University of Florida. I am a Mexican American. I identify as bisexual, and I am currently planning on pursuing a future in politics to help improve the conditions of our country and improve the conditions of everyone in our community and any other community that's affected by ignorance and bigotry. So yes, I'm glad to be on this team. I can't wait for presentations to start.
Yeah, so thank you. Big round of applause to my admin team. They've all been doing a lot of work, and I'm really proud of what we've put together. So I really hope you all enjoy it. And so next up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the our Pride History event. So this is one of our 4 annual special events that we do each year. It used to be a week-long series, but this year, due to COVID and other factors, we decided to condense it all into one amazing event. So we do this every year to kind of highlight important milestones in queer history, as well as amplifying unheard voices in the movement. And this is kind of our way of honoring the history and those before us, as well as continuing to keep that history alive and pass those stories on in our community. And so next, Nicole is going to talk us through some basic community guidelines.
Okay, so for our community guidelines, first, we want to speak from the I, which just means avoiding generalizations about groups of people. So only like speaking for yourself and your experiences. And then also we want to make space and take space. So this just means that if you're a part of a marginalized community, then you speaking up and talking about your experiences. And then if you have like priority or privilege in like certain identities, then making space to allow other people to talk about their experiences. And then we also just want to give give yourself and others the space to be challenged and to learn, because we're here to learn here. So, and then also just like a side note, queer will be used in this space as a reclaim word, referring to anyone not cis and straight.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So we just kind of wanted to give those little guidelines to kind of set the tone for, an open and honest discussion where we can all show up in the ways that we are, be present, and be willing to learn. So if anyone has any additional guidelines that they'd like to suggest, feel free to drop those in the chat or unmute yourself and say that. We're definitely open. Okay, so we will go on then to the first portion of our presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Indigenous LGBTQ plus history. I just want to start off by saying that like I'm not an expert on this topic, and so if anybody has knowledge about this topic, feel free to unmute or type in the chat to share like your experiences, or if I pronounce something wrong, feel free to correct me. Okay, so just to get started here, the Spanish explorer Pedro Menendez de Avalos settled in St. Augustine in 1565. This was the first permanent European settlement in the United States. So this was just the start of European conquest that disrupted the lives of indigenous peoples. And so you can see on the map on the left-hand side of Florida of all these different tribes and their territories. So there were tensions between the colonizing powers in Europe. And so these things brought war, it brought disease, unfortunately Native people being enslaved, and forced relocation of tribes. So with European colonialization came forced cultural assimilation. And so there were these Catholic missions that were established to convert indigenous people to Christianity. And then there were also boarding schools that forbid children from using their culture, so language, their names, religion, clothes, haircuts, and any other aspect of their culture. So you can notice in the picture that that's that same person on the left. They're in traditional Native American clothing and dress, and then on the right, they are in like a traditional European attire. And so along with all the other different aspects of Native American culture, there was also the two-spirit identity. So this word is derived from Nizah Manaduwag in the Anishinaabe language. So this identity, to the two-spirit identity, has been used to refer to individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, transgender, transsexual, gender fluid, or intersex. But more generally, it's used to refer to a person with both feminine and masculine traits. And so the earliest existing sources for the two spirits comes from the Tacoma people of North Florida. So Europeans basically had no concept of more than two genders. So their accounts have a lot of misrepresentations and misunderstandings of two-spirit people. They thought that the two spirits were looked down upon by other Tacoma, but this really wasn't true, because the two spirits, they were entrusted with important duties in the tribe, things like political roles, doing hard labor, taking care of the sick, taking care of the injured, and mothers that just gave birth. They also prepared the dead for burial, and they were thought to bridge boundaries between this world and the sacred world, between life and death and between men and women. And so because of this forced assimilation by Europeans, by the 1930s and 40s, the traditions of the Two-Spirit people had been driven out of a lot of Native tribes. And on the right, if you can notice that picture of Two-Spirit people.
So now we're going to talk about one-dimensional LGBTQ plus rights. And much of LGBTQ plus visibility is not documented until the 1920s and on. And the USA was created with cis straight white men in power, which means that it was largely lacking in legal protections for marginalized folks. And in this picture, we can see a large parade of people. Some people were holding up a sign that says "Lesbians Fight for Freedom." And that's just one example of one of the movements for LGBTQ plus rights. The rise of activism for these rights began showing a common trend, a push for sameness and assimilation of the LGBTQ plus community with the mainstream. And I feel like a large portion of this was due to the fact that the LGBTQ plus community felt like acceptance meant that they had to assimilate. And luckily, I feel like this has changed over time, but unfortunately, this was the reality back then. With the focus on social normalcy came the neglection of marginalized LGBTQ plus individuals, including the activists and their work prior to the Stonewall riots. So basically, a really good example of this would be Bayard Rustin, who's a Black figurehead in both the gay and civil rights movements, and he is one of the primary people who helped organize the March on Washington, and he has been erased from history because of his status as a gay Black man. So the activism of the middle class, white, cis, gay men has been thrown into the spotlight due to their positions of power and being more digestible for the mainstream media within these movements. And unfortunately, I feel like this is still pretty prominent today. And hopefully we can really move toward changing this because so many activists and influential people in this movement were people of color. So an example of how the white, cis, gay men who really were, figureheads for this movement is on the left, where it's the Obergefell versus Hodges case, where same-sex marriage was legalized. And in this picture, you can see that it's just all white passing men who are, at the front of this movement. And there are no people of color. This doesn't mean that no people of color were involved. It just means that the people they decided to put up front to represent this movement were all white.
Hello, so this is Diego again. I'll be talking about multidimensional queer liberation as the different aspects and different building blocks that put together the queer liberation movement up to the point in which it started. And so one of the very prominent events that took place during the queer liberation was the Stonewall riots on June 28th of 1969. And the Stonewall riots were a response to the oppressive authority of law enforcement because of the treatment of LGBT individuals in New York City. Police officers raided Stonewall Inn, a well-known gay club in Greenwich Village, New York City, and this acted as a catalyst for protests and civil disobedience that lasted 6 days. Marsha P. Johnson, along with Sylvia Rivera and other transgender and gender nonconforming people of color, have been accredited with starting the infamous Stonewall riots of 1969. And this was not the first instance of oppression for the LGBT plus community and other minority groups, but it was one of the tipping points for the future of protests and civil activism. And to this day, police authority is still an oppressive force that continues to mistreat groups of people for being different and for following different paths than what was considered mainstream. These same instances of abuse of power has also occurred to indigenous people of the United States when they were subject to mass genocide for their sacred land, and this is one of many instances in which violence was used to keep people at bay and in a state of vulnerability. For all of American history, even up to the modern day, minority groups and the Black community in particular have been subjugated to abuse from this country, the police, and the politicians that were meant to protect their rights to live. They're also meant to protect their rights of liberty and as well as happiness. And this is where the idea of intersectionality comes into play. Intersectionality is the idea of an interconnected nature of social categorizations, such as race, class, gender, ethnicity, any type of label or any type of subgroup of people can be put together, and they can be compared to in terms of the types of experiences that they undergo. And this creates like an overlapping system of things that were thought as of being independent to actually being something that works mutually, and they are in a way working together to one's disadvantage and in forms of various forms of discrimination. And this is a theory that was developed by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And again, this is, for example, traits that can affect somebody in terms of prejudices that they face. For example, an Indigenous woman, a Black man, a transgender woman. These are all people that are subject to different experiences and different forms of abuse because of who they are, based off the traits that make them who they are as a person. And one of the examples of it, the very first United States gay rights protest occurred on September 19th, 1964. And this was organized by gay men, women, and straight allies. And this took place outside of the United States Army building in Lower Manhattan. And this was a response to homophobic and very discriminatory policies within the United States Army, in which it highlighted the hypocrisy at the time and up to modern day, in which these soldiers, these LGBT plus soldiers, would be sent overseas across the world to fight for liberties that at the end of the day didn't apply to them. And this is stuff that makes up our history as the LGBT community and the histories that we share with the Black community, Indigenous community, Hispanic community, any group of minorities that undergo the same experiences or similar experience that we do. This is a shared history that is different than the history we grow into with our families, but these are histories that we are born into as well. And these types of liberties and these types of abuse of liberties also makes modern allusion to modern times when the Trump administration banned transgender individuals from the United States Army. This shows that yes, we have made heaps and leaps of progress. There's still much to be done in order for groups to no longer feel oppressed in this very country and in this very world. So tying that back, Stonewall Inn is one of the catalyst sites for the queer liberation movement. And it was never just about gay people. And this was about the same activists that fought for the struggles of class and race. And the struggle and the tactics used, such as civil resistance, direct action, conscious raising, these were effects and these were motivations that were used by the civil rights movement, the suffrage movement, the workers movement. So this shows, again, the interconnectedness of our history as well as the history of other people around us. So that's what makes the many different layers and dimensions of what makes up the queer movement.
Yeah, thank you, Diego. So just to kind of like go off of what Diego was saying, so we kind of wanted to present two like kind of distinct ideas in terms of like liberation movements and social movements, specifically regarding LGBTQ plus community. For example, you have some like waves of people or some groups of people who focus on like the legal landscape, who focus on getting equal protections in the law. And then you have other forms of, or other groups of people who are focusing on the liberation aspect, you know, finding ways to connect, build out solidarity across communities. Like Diego was saying, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, they weren't just involved in queer liberation, they were there for the struggles of race, they were there for the struggles of class. And that kind of like, we kind of wanted to emphasize like the multidimensional roots of the LGBTQ plus movement. And both of these, you know, different ways of thinking are important, and we need work in both. But that's kind of like where we were going with that. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about trans women and femmes of color specifically. So like Diego was saying about intersectionality, this group of people hold multiple marginalized identities. So, you know, they are trans, they are a person of color, they may have other factors that are impacting them as well. And it makes us like very vulnerable as like a group of the LGBTQ plus community. Um, And then one thing that we also wanted to honor was like the pivotal role and like the leadership that trans women and gender nonconforming femmes of color have played in the queer movement, you know, particularly working for sex work decriminalization, racial justice, immigration rights, disability justice, prison abolition, immigration rights, and much, much more. We want to acknowledge the substantial contributions and note that there are so many other people that aren't going to be remembered. For example, across the bottom, we have some major trans icons like Miss Major, Cece McDonald, Laverne Cox, and Tourmaline. But you know, while we do have these like very prominent icons, there are other ones, a lot of them who will never be named and you know who will never get to know personally, which is why we want to continue these conversations, continue to find these stories and uplift them. um, and then kind of going back again to the intersectionality lens of like only when the most marginalized of us are free can we all be free. um, and so yeah, um, I'm trying to think. um, And then another reason that I also wanted to point out as to like why trans women are often leading these movements is because as someone who is facing multiple sources of oppression for different identities, in order to survive, we have like become experts in resistance, and we are often ones like taking that charge because we have the most to gain. Because you know we are facing all of these different systems and institutions trying to keep us down. We are trying to survive in a society that was never meant for us and never included our voices. So that's kind of another big reason why trans women specifically are at the forefront of a lot of these liberation movements. So before we go on to the next part, I just wanted to do a quick check and see if anyone had any questions or anything they wanted to contribute to the conversation. Kind of covered a lot of different things, so kind of want to take a pause to see how everyone's feeling, if they have any reactions to anything they learned.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in about when Diego's piece was happening, talking about intersectionality. You know, Kimberly Crenshaw is always usually brought up when talking about intersectionality, but there was an amazing Black femme collective with like lesbian folks called the Combahee River Collective that really brought a lot of the ideals of intersectionality like to the forefront of just like how we think about gender and race and class and how those all intersect. But the term like intersectionality wasn't coined yet. But a lot of like that work and those like ways of thinking have, you know, been thought about, just not really like brought to the forefront a lot. So I just wanted to bring their name into the hat when talking about like intersectionality.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's really important to make sure that we are acknowledging the work of those before us, you know, naming those people. So thank you, Giela, for that. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add? Okay. So next we're going to move into the panel portion. So I'm really excited to, oh, JK, here's a list of references in case anyone want to take a quick picture of this so you can do some further background reading. I'll give everyone a second. And so now I would like to introduce our panelists. So we have three activists in Gainesville as well as Jacksonville joining us tonight to kind of talk about their experiences, talk more about the work they do, and using our platform as an organization to kind of uplift them. So our panelists tonight are Regina Livingston, Gostria, and Giella. And so I am going to let them all start with some introductions. So if you want to share your name, your pronouns, any salient or important identities that you hold, and where you're from. So we can start off with Gostria.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gostria. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs. I'm comfortable with either one. I work at Santa Fe College with Student Affairs, part of College Achievement Program, specifically a program that works with students that are first-generation college students that are students of color. I identify as a Black, queer, trans, Indigenous woman. I'm from Gainesville, I said that. And I'm also a part of the LGBTQ plus collective at Santa Fe and the Black Faculty and Staff Association.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Gastria.
Of
And
course, thank you.
next, we can go on to Giella.
Hey friends, my name is Sheila. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I identify as a Black, Mexican, Latinx, non-binary person. I occupy space in Jacksonville, um, and other identities. I'm a singer, I'm a rapper, I'm a DJ. I'm an educator, organizer. I do all the things, too many things. And also a student as well. I just went back to school, so I'm excited about that. So yeah, I need to be doing homework as well. I know someone said they did some homework. But yeah, I am mostly known for DJing. I organize a BIPOC dance space in Jacksonville called Duval Folks. It's just like basically a dope dance party for marginalized communities here in town. And I work at the LGBT Center, Jasmine. It's a youth center here in Jacksonville, and that's pretty much all I do. I get in trouble a lot in Jacksonville.
Thank you, Giella, for being here with us. And last but definitely not least, Regina.
Hello, my name is Regina Livingston. I'm the Executive Director of Unspoken Treasure Society, Inc. Um, my pronouns are she, her, queen, diva. I reside in Gainesville, Florida, and that's where the base of Unspoken Treasure is. We're also in Jacksonville, Florida. We're also in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're also in Hollywood, Florida. We have 4 chapters. We are here to simply make ourselves aware and known and to unify the community. That's something that is very important. Gainesville, Florida is separated, and we're trying to unify it. I was born and raised here in Gainesville, Florida, so I knew coming back that work needed to be done here. So when I came back, I started the work. I know that some of the work is minuscule because people don't think it exists, but the separation is there and it's important. And we need to come together and able to accomplish the goal that we are all collectively trying to reach together as one.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So now we got a little introduction of our panelists. I'm going to start going through the questions. So the first question is, what do you think the dominant narrative of LGBTQ plus history, and how accurate do you feel like this narrative is? So let's start with Giella.
So I think a big part of the dominant language of like where like LGBT history starts is always with Stonewall. And for me, it kind of like it I don't know, it kind of cringes me a little bit because it kind of makes me think about how Americans think that like Black culture starts with slavery. And it's like there's so much more narrative before Stonewall. There's so much more narrative with like Blackness before slavery. And I think it's just like that's kind of what people automatically associate it with. And especially with like, you know, even trans bodies, you know, the way that we have like just pretty much mortified trans bodies and just like totally like just have given them such this like bad stigma in film and even in the way that we teach and the way that we talk about it. And so I think that really dominates a lot of it due to film and just like what we have seen like celebrities do, basically because like cis het people have been the ones to tell our stories and not really seeing like Black trans women telling our stories, seeing, you know, POC or BIPOC people telling our stories. And I think it's just, that's why it's so inaccurate. It's because like cis het white people have been telling the narrative. And I think it's so beautiful now to see like so much more not even representation, because I hate that word too, but so much more people disrupting space and taking that space, and creating, communities of care and not waiting for gay white men to kind of lead the way. And I think that's where a lot of it is shifting now. So.
Yeah, very, very well said. Thank you. And so next, I'm gonna pass it over to Regina if you have anything else to add.
First and foremost, Excella, you said everything that was on my mind. You cut up.
It's what I do. I get in trouble in Jacksonville a lot.
But let me explain something. It's not all about the Black agenda or the white agenda or the Asian or the Latinx. I am a unifier. And so my point is that I feel like we all are up under one umbrella. And I feel like people don't realize that. I feel like we're up under one umbrella. And when we're trying to say, oh, it's white this and black this and yellow this, but do you understand that our community is up under scrutiny and Trump is saying transgender when he says refuse medical care. Mm-hmm. He's saying transgender when he's saying refuse them to homeless shelters. He's saying transgender when the whole message that he's sending out is awful and it's wrong. And he is sending the message out to everyone. And I don't know why people are missing that. Mm-hmm. So the connection for me is, and for me being here is to unify. Mm-hmm. Because we need to be unified. We need to be brought together. Because wrong, right, era, we're all up under the same umbrella. And we're all going to receive the same thing that this idiot is trying to accomplish. That part. Because he didn't say Black transgenders or white transgenders or Asian transgenders. He said transgenders. Mm-hmm. So my biggest goal and what I stand for is unification. Mm-hmm. And we need to be together as a unit. And that's so important. And I need us to wake up to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. And Gosha, do you have any other things to add to the question?
Okay, y'all be cutting this up. I was about to say, I ain't got nothing to say. But one thing I would say definitely that the dominant narrative of LGBTQ plus history is one that's been whitewashed and cis-normative, that specifically catered to elite, the late queer, white gay men. And so a lot of that kind of goes back to what Giello was saying, what they were saying about being able to tell our own stories, as queer and trans people of color, specifically Black trans folks, we have not had that resource to be able to tell our stories, and it's usually through the lens of someone else. So, and if it's not through cishet white people telling our stories, it's the queer and trans folks of our community that are white, that are using their privilege above us to speak for us or just completely erase us from history. So all of it's very disappointing and upsetting, but I definitely would say that is not an accurate representation of our community.
Thank you. So now we can go on to the next question. So if you all can tell us a little bit about how being a person of color and being and identifying as trans or gender nonconforming has impacted the way you navigate life. And you can also talk about any other identities that you feel really important and the way that you exist in this world. So we can start off with Gastria.
Right. One thing that I would say is as a Black, queer trans woman, I'm constantly worried about my safety. That's a major issue, due to, anti-trans violence, specifically with affecting Black transgender women. You know, the average life expectancy for a Black trans woman is 35 years old. And I'm not sure if everyone knows this or not, but this year is the deadliest year in American history for Black trans women, with 34 murders, and a majority of those are Black trans women that are being murdered. So constantly being in a state of like worried about my safety, and then also not really kind of like a less dangerous aspect, but having to navigate spaces and, you know, check identities at the door, never fully being able to, you know, go into a space and fully be myself, you know, where my transness is challenged, or my Blackness is challenged, or my queerness is challenged, but very rarely can I enter a space and fully be my, you know, authentic self, where I feel like a lot of like cis queer folks or white trans folks don't have those issues necessarily as much. And so that's like a major issue. Also police violence, specifically with the Black Lives Matter movement and protests that have been going on during the summer. That has been kind of very frightening for me, with protesting and showing up to things and kind of the fear of police brutality, you know, and being a Black brown body, and what does that ensue with police brutality and violence. So as trans women, specifically Black trans women, I feel we are a threat to toxic masculinity, those ideologies. And so for that, we're always kind of like put, I don't know, always like have a target on our back, if that makes sense. And so constantly we're always being under attack. Our bodies, our identities, we're always in a state of like panic, I think, and just leads to further trauma within our community.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing and being so open with us. And I saw Regina, you're really resonating with a lot of that. So if you want to take on this question next.
It is so imperative for this community to realize that we all are existing in the same arena. It is so important. And even I can say that there's privilege in the Caucasian community. I can say that, but who really knows that? Who really takes time to participate and see what's going on in the Caucasian community, because they don't get what we get. And at the same token and point, we are all still fighting the same battle. So if we're not fighting the same battle, then something is different in these different entities and communities. That's why my fight is for community. That's why my fight is into unity. And I want to hold hands and walk across the same gate with each and every race. I don't want it to be different. But everyone on this panel has said tonight is on point. No one has said anything different. But it's not separate when it comes to races, because it happens. I've been there. I've witnessed it. We all face the same things, the same dilemmas. Everything is the same, regardless if it's at the same time or token. Trust me, it's coming. So when different races think that, oh, that's just for the African American race, in the end, you're gonna gag, because I promise you, it's going to come. So that's why it's so important for the unification. That's why it's so important for us to cross that line together. Numbers rule. And united, we stand. Divided, we fall. And that's just the bottom line.
Thank you, Regina. And Giella, do you want to add some stuff?
Yeah, I think for me, in my experience, being in Jacksonville, you know, I do present in a way where I can be misgendered as being like cishet, like woman. So, you know, I do want to acknowledge that because I do mostly present as like femme presenting. So in certain ways, I do have like certain like when I navigate like my queerness and things like that. But I feel like the biggest pushback, or maybe just like what I experience a lot being in town in Jacksonville, is, you know, I get pushback for speaking up or speaking out about like what a lot of my youth experience. Working at an LGBT center, you know, I work with a lot of like trans and like gender nonconforming homeless youth, you know, youth who are like also living with HIV. And so kind of bringing those ideas to the table and just like kind of calling out my community. Because for me, like I said, a lot of like white gay people in this city do not really understand the reality that a lot of the community has experienced, being Black and also like Latinx folks. You know, they're always constantly being left out of conversations, especially when it comes to Pride. We don't see Black and brown bodies on the stage. I have been doing music in this community for over 7 years, you know, out as a lesbian, like Black, you know, person, and never have I been invited to Pride. I have been in Folio, I have been in like all these like publications and things like that. And it's just like they consistently are not including like Black and brown trans people in Pride. And it's very frustrating. Most of the times, like my friends who are at Pride, my white friends, are the ones that invite me to even be on the stage. And, you know, this year I did call them out because it's very frustrating that we're celebrating like a 50th year anniversary for Stonewall, and Marsha P. Johnson or Sylvia Rivera's name have not been said on the stage. And why is that? You know? And then, you know, them allowing like a police officer to come on stage to tell me to calm down when, you know, you had like white men, little dinglings out there all the time. But one time that I say something, a police officer comes on stage, a brown person, to tell me that I need to calm down. And so that impacted me in a huge way, because it made me realize that like I do live in the South, and it's very prevalent to see that across like all like LGBT things in Jacksonville, except for when I'm organizing with like, you know, Black trans women and things like that. You know, I don't get that type of pushback. And so it is very frustrating sometimes, but also like the one thing that I do love about being in the South is that the magical queerness of like queer solidarity and like Southern solidarity among like folks who live in the South. And that brings me so much joy to know that I do have community, you know, in the South, with so many Black and brown, trans, gender nonconforming LGBT folks. And it just has like lifted my spirits to know that like, you know, an organization like Song exists where like Black and brown, like Indigenous folks are like coming together in solidarity and doing a lot of work that needs to be done. And so, yeah, that's basically kind of like my experience of like navigating life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Um, so for our next question, I kind of wanted you all to kind of like tell us a little bit about who your favorite queer icon was and like why you look up to this person, um, to get both like, you know, talking about like the serious stuff, but then also, you know, kind of celebrating and uplifting those like people that we do have in our community to look up to. So Regina, if you'd like to start us off telling us about who your favorite queer icon is and why.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so number 4, who is your favorite queer icon and why?
Okay. Ooh, you getting ready to make a lot of people mad. um, One of my favorite queer icons was Marsha P. Johnson. And that is because she didn't care who she fought for. She fought for community. She was she was a trans, she wasn't a transgender, but she, she dressed. And she fought for everyone. And she didn't fight for a race. She fought for everybody standing in that circle. And my whole thing is that's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, what people don't realize and what we don't realize maybe in some of our minds is that we're fighting for each other. It's not a separation. We're fighting for one another. So the whole spectrum needs to be united, and there's no way they can divide us. And we're big in numbers. We're big in numbers. So sticking together will complete our goal. And it'll be a case closed type situation. So that's the biggest goal. Am I wrong or am I right, G? Gustria?
Yeah, you right. You made a few points.
I mean, I'm just saying, to get divided, we're going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
United, we're going to stand tall.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line.
Period.
Yeah, thank you. And Giella, since you're already unmuted, if you want to go ahead and take on this question for us.
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, again, like for me, yes, like for me, I see more solidarity between like Black and brown like folks, and for me, it's hard to trust white people just because of like the experience that I've experienced living in the South, living here, the things that my mother went through as a migrant worker, the things that my father went through as like having medical racism put upon him, and then just like intergenerationally what both my families have gone through. So it's hard for me because I see more solidarity between Black and brown folks. So for that's just my experience. But my favorite queer icon, definitely 100% when we were talking about like erasures with identity, Angela Davis, she is a Black lesbian, a very proud Black lesbian, and has always talked about liberation, LGBT folks, and like race and class and gender, and just everything about her is just something that I look up to, I aspire to. I mean, she was, I don't know, she's flawless in my eyes, but I see her. I'm sure she had some flaws and stuff, but I don't know, I just like really love and am trying my best to practice like abolition practices and ideals, and sometimes it's hard, but I think that's a lot of like my assimilation and like learning to decolonize that within myself, but she's definitely 100% someone that I look up to.
Yes.
Yeah. I was actually talking to my roommate about Angela Davis the other day, and she was saying like how like what she was like wondering like what it feels like to be like on the FBI's most wanted list because of like being so strong in your Blackness. And I was like wow, this is everything. Like if
I'm sure it's terrifying.
No.
Yeah, like
No.
real tea, but
Yeah.
She had a whole unit like Black Panther stuck with, so
oh yes.
they was taking people out of jail. Like, come on now.
Yeah, and Gostria, if you want to go next.
Yes, I gotta agree. I'm giving a few snaps for G. I definitely agree with you. I love me some Angela Davis. Love her so much. And I also kind of like piggybacking off what you were saying about like finding solidarity within like Black and brown people and like Black and brown communities. specifically, I totally have to agree with you. And so when it comes to my favorite queer icon, I'm gonna have to say Marsha P. Johnson. She was an incredible Black trans woman that was a sex worker. She specifically worked so hard to protect young queer and trans youth, specifically that were homeless. She's also a prison abolitionist. She was a sex worker, a drag queen, a performer, a queer, artist of all sorts. And I look up to her so much. I love her. She was really the one that created the blueprint for what queer and trans liberation would look like for Black and brown people, in my eyes, kind of during that time of Stonewall, and so I look to her, for a lot of things when I'm advocating or doing advocacy work, or even doing something like this, just speaking on a panel. I always think about her and the work that she did and how can I continue her legacy.
So beautifully said. The theme of our event, honoring our legacy. I love that. Thank you all so much. And now we're going to move on to our next set of questions. So next question, in what ways do you connect the history of the queer community and those that have come before you? We can start off with Giella.
I think like similar to like what my other two panelists said, is just like kind of keeping them in the forefront of my mind. I have this really amazing little wooden piece that this boo gave to me that has a sketch, the famous picture of like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, like the one where they're like yelling, and it's like carved out, and it says Transcestors, and so it's hard sometimes to occupy space as a non-binary person when I'm in space with trans people, because like I said, I do present in a more like cishet, like a lot of people think I'm cishet like woman, and I recognize that, and I don't want folks to feel like I live this very like oppressive life, and because I don't. Like reality, I have a house, like I have a job where I work 40 hours a week, I do gigs and things like that, and more of my job is to elevate like stories and elevate like mutual aid of like my community, and use my platform the best that I can to help my siblings in this community, and so I try to connect history by using my platform to do that, because I feel a lot of people like in history, did hang out within this community, like most famously Madonna. She hung out with the gays and the queers and all that, and stole a lot of their their imagery, the way that they dressed, and put them in videos, and like fetishize them, but didn't like take the time to really uplift them and name them, and I think that is a part of like feminist practice, is making sure to name the people in this community, to like uplift them and to like not use them, and so for me, that's how I try to like connect my history, is just by using my little platform that I have to make sure to always highlight, the messed up things that go on in my community, within homelessness, within people who are living with HIV, the stigmatizingness of their bodies that they experience when they go to the doctor. Like they just trying to get medicine, and you worrying about like my identity for what? Like trans like people are going onto like mobile buses just trying to get like a STI testing, and they're getting refused care because they're trans. Why? Like why is that even a thing? I'm here for a medical reason. You are a doctor. That's all you need to know. And so yeah, that's just what I try to do, is just like try to speak up and speak out for my community, because I have more privilege, even though we're all on the outliers, but I'm a little bit closer to the center, so just making sure to bring everyone in.
Yeah, thank you, and Gostria, if you want to go next.
Yes, I have to agree. All right, for me personally, it's all about celebrating celebrating my trans ancestors, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Miss Major. I love them so much. I look to them, I talked about that a little earlier. But for me personally, it's more of like looking at their legacy as a whole of what their activism and looked like, and kind of continuing the work that they started. That's something that's really important to me. Another thing, I don't know if y'all can see my background, but I'm not really like a religious person, but I am super kind of spiritual. And so something that I've had this up for about a year. I think of it as like kind of like my altar. So I have like a bunch of signs up, like Black Lives Matter. It's a picture of Marsha, a picture of like the first Pride was a riot. It's a bunch of like queer, like radical, like posters and pictures behind me. And it's the first thing I see pretty much when I wake up in the morning, when I'm getting ready, doing my hair, doing my makeup, just getting ready for my day. And then it's the last thing I see at night when I'm winding down. But it's just not like a constant reminder of our community, of the work that they did, that they're still doing. Miss Major is kicking and, doing everything. She's still here with us. I love her. So I don't know, it's just like a friendly, sweet reminder, like surrounding myself with their work, their legacy. I find it to be incredibly inspirational, and yeah, it warms my heart, so.
Yeah, thank you. Regina, if you want to talk a little bit about how you connect to the history of those before you.
Say it again, a little louder.
If you just want to tell us a little bit about how you connect to the history of the queer movement and a lot of like the icons and activists that came before us.
Okay, so for you to even ask how I connect to the queer movement, I'm Black. That's first and foremost. There's nothing you can, when you look at me, you see how I connect to the movement, okay? I'm one of the people that is made to feel less than. I'm one of the people that is made to feel ostracized. I'm one of the people that has to go extra hard to achieve any dream or any goal that I go after. So that's who I am. I am an African-American transgender woman, Natalia Dupree, AKA by the regular name is Regina Livingston. And all I want is for us to remain. I want us to be able to stand, understand, as a joint, as a unity, as a unit. We need each other. At the end of the day, we need each other. I need you, Alex. I need you, G. I need you, Gostria. I need you, Nicole. I need you, Ariel. In order for us to reach the point that we are trying to reach, we need one another, period. There's nothing after that. We need one another. Because trust me, after I fall, you'll be soon behind if you don't pay attention. Thank you.
Remain. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. Did everybody
Yes.
answer? I kind of lost track. I feel like everyone
Yeah,
did. Okay, so sorry. So next we're gonna go on to the next question. So what do you see as being the next big step or the next big milestone for queer history and for the queer movement? Regina, if you want to start us off. You're muted.
What do I see as the next milestone? I see Ariel on this side of me. I see Alex on this side of me. I see Gastria on this side of me. I see Nicole on this side of me. I see us walking hand in hand and asking for what we deserve and for what we have worked for and for what we have strived for. Unity, unification. And I can go on and on with all the names, but you get it. I see what we are trying to accomplish, but what you all need to see is that it can't be accomplished unless it's united.
I feel that. I feel that. Thank you, Regina. And Gastria, if you want to take this on next.
Yes. Okay. Wow, Regina, that was a lot, girl. That touched me, girl. I love that. Something I say for me personally, I think is more intersectional community organizing that directly uplifts Black and trans women of color and femmes. And also kind of like, I don't know, kind of like a side thought, something that I've been kind of seeing specifically within our LGBTQ plus community that I kind of find it to be really problematic, but sex workers not being recognized. So making sex worker rights a policy priority, making sure that today's organized activism is inclusive of sex workers, their presence, their needs, and their history within our community. I think sometimes like people typically kind of look at issues that are LGBTQ plus or look at issues as like a Black issue or look at things as like a sex worker issue, but realizing that sex worker issues are LGBTQ plus issues as well. It's not either or. So I think maybe the biggest milestone possibly that I see within our LGBTQ plus community, like, you know, moving forward, I think was more recognition of sex workers, more recognition of gender non-conforming, non-binary people. And so I just hope to see our community more centered and also having more centering of Black trans folks, specifically Black trans women. I think that's something definitely, I feel like there's like a cosmic shift right now in our society, in our community, where we're finally kind of prioritizing and seeing a little bit of Black trans women and kind of seeing our value and realizing that we've been neglected and realizing the systems of oppression in which we've been experiencing. But I think we're just scratching the surface of that. So I would like moving forward our community to be more aware of those issues specifically. And to, because we have so many issues within our community of like trans misogyny war and things like that. So I would love to see the future of our community address those issues and eradicate them.
Absolutely. And Giella, if you want to continue on.
Yes, both of those things that both of y'all said. But I think for me, it's definitely just power shifting, you know, to the most marginalized in our community, decolonizing the way that we think about, you know, supporting our community. Nonprofits can't do everything because they're part of capitalism, so we need to be real about that. You know, they cannot support this community. Mutual aid supports community, and fucking shit up. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but I'm gonna cuss anyways.
Fuck it up.
That seems the only way they like to pay attention. That seems the only way they like to change stuff is when we fucking shit up. And I don't care about none of these buildings. I don't care about none of these establishments because we can't bring nobody back.
Yeah.
We can't bring nobody on any of these little lists, any of these little t-shirts, any of these little things you like to capitalize on. You know, we given like, we're not even like criminalizing police officers that are doing this work. You know, they getting criminalized for shooting up walls but not shooting up bodies. And I feel like the biggest step is just gonna be us fucking shit up. Like, and they like to say like, you know, y'all need to protest peacefully, all that. Since when? Because last time I checked, Martin Luther King was killed by the FBI. Last time I checked, Malcolm X was killed by the FBI. And these are facts. You can look it up. And so, how do we learn violence? How do we learn how to, fight? Because we've been doing this overseas for how long now? We've been in Palestine. We've been in Iraq. We've been in all these other communities. Y'all have taken so many lives. So when we start messing y'all stuff up, then y'all want to get upset. And then that's when y'all want to change stuff. So for me, I feel like it's fucking shit up. That's going to be the next step because they're not paying attention when we do stuff peacefully. So
finger snaps all around for that. Thank you. Thank you. So
For sure.
yeah. So for the next question, so how do you continue this legacy of trans women and gender nonconforming fans of color today? So for this question, you can talk a little bit about like how you connect to that, how you continue that. But this is also a question where you can talk about like the work that you do and how you feel like that's important to continuing that legacy. So this is kind of like your little self-promo section. So Regina, if you want to start us off with question number 7.
I offer every pedestal in the book. We have a safe space. We have the youth safe spaces. We have the virtual safe spaces. We have the resources. And we don't keep those resources to ourselves because there are resources over the map that people don't know about. I make our resources loud. I make noise to let you know we have these resources here. So you know that you can come here and get help for this, that, the third, or etc. But my thing is, that's the problem. See, we have been ostracized and held to this different standard for so long. We don't understand that those things are available to us. We don't know. Do you really think that people go through what they go through and not come for help for no reason? They're not coming for help for a reason. They don't feel like they have anywhere to go. Okay? And that's where we come in and shout it from the rooftop. You have somewhere to go. We are here. And we don't turn away anybody. There's not been one person turned away. So that's one of the most important, because when I say unify, it really means unify. It means I need to be able to reach out my hand and hold the next person that's standing by me. Not I need to look for someone of color and move them out the way and grab their hand. It needs to be across the board, period. This has got to come to a union. It's got to be unified. That's the only way. There's never going to be a point to where it's just you who needs help in this part of our spectrum. We're all going to need help. And I'm sorry that some people don't think it's going to happen, but trust me, it's going to happen. We're all going to need help. We're all going to need each other. So it needs to be unified across the board, period.
Yes, thank you, Gina. And we can go to Gostria if you want to share with us.
Yes, right. Snap for that. But for me personally, I work at Santa Fe College, and I started out as a student there, and Santa Fe didn't really have any type of LGBTQ plus resource center or any type of support groups. And so the LGBTQ plus collective, this is the first semester it's ever existed, where the college is actually funding money to create a resource center, kind of modeled off of the MCDA at UF, which is really exciting, and I get to be a part of like the committee for it and everything. So for me, when it comes to like organizing on campus, specifically for students and creating events and workshops and whatnot that specifically are resources for students that are queer and trans, it's really imperative to me, kind of looking back at like Marsha P. Johnson, like I said, Sylvia Rivera, Malcolm X, so many queer trans icons that I really look up to, and kind of the dedication that they had to the advocacy that they did. And so for me, it's really important, being part of that. And then also I'm a part of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, which that's been established for years at Santa Fe, but that association has never collaborated with any other type of events. And so for me being now like an LGBTQ plus committee member, I definitely want to strive to create leadership between like the Black Student Association and like LGBTQ plus affairs, and sync them together to create community specifically. And so kind of talking about that intersection about being queer, trans, and also a person of color. And I'm also, the only Keithy Bach, queer trans person of color on the committee, and the only trans woman. So it is interesting, working with a bunch of like cis white, queer folks. And so I'm trying to like bridge the gap, and having all these other like organizations collaborating and, working together. And so for me, kind of with the work that I do, I kind of look at, our LGBTQ plus icons and what they've done and the persistence that they've had. And I try to, I guess, mimic that to the best of my ability, or recreate that in a different sense at Santa Fe, a college that just didn't have those resources, and now we finally do. So I'm all about establishing those resources for the students and creating unity between all different orgs on campus. So
Thank you so much for all of that work that you do. And I'm very excited also that I heard that they're getting that resource center. Very excited to see how that takes form. So glad that you're there to, make sure that we're heard. So Giella, if you want to take on the question.
Just shout out to both of the other panelists. They're both doing amazing work in their communities, and I'm continuously inspired by Black and brown people in the South doing it. For me, so I created a dance party about, it's been 3 years now, called Duval Folks. Basically, I was DJing in gay clubs in my community. And I just started to see a really big difference between gay community and queer community very quickly. And it was very frustrating because I was really micromanaged in those clubs. I was told that, hey, like this music is only played on urban nights and this music is only played on Latin nights. And it was just like really frustrating to always, feel those like microaggressions. And then also being like a Black, femme, just like, white gay men thinking they can touch me and like, call me girl, or just like, just basically do the most, and, the only people that really did care for me were Black, trans women. They always checked in on me, made sure I was okay, like a lot of the performers, and things like that. And so, and I was also, really mistreated, because, these owners like to do a lot of chemical imbalances in their bodies. And so I was just like always like yelled at and just like mistreated as like a staff worker there, being the DJ. And so then when I went to the other club, it was like even more of like being micromanaged and, people just like touching me, grabbing me. And I just didn't feel safe. And again, just being like micromanage with like the music that I make and or the music that I play. And so I was just kind of like, you know what? I want to create a space that is unapologetically queer, that is unapologetically Black. I can play any type of music I want to play, unapologetically Hispanic because I wanted to play, reggaeton and things like that. And also fostered a space of safety for femme presenting folks, for trans folks, because also in 2018, Jacksonville was the epicenter for Black trans unfortunately being murdered. And so I wanted to create a dance space that fostered all of that. And so I created Duval Folks. And basically when I made the promo, I had all my Black and brown friends like on the cover because I also was like, every time I see imagery in like queer clubs, it's always like so overly sexualized. And just like, if it's like men, they have their shirts off and it's like the little pee-pee is hanging, and like with women, it's like, it's like pictures of Nicki Minaj. The posters looking like in the clubs now. It just was ghetto and I was not here for it. And so I just wanted to show like queer people, and I'm also, like I said, an educator and organizer. So I let them know what was tea. When you come into my party, don't be touching nobody. When you come into my party, you better ask for pronouns. When you come into my body, don't be touching Black femmes. Because was a lot of my experience too going to the club as a Black femme, is being grabbed on and being like touched. My hair, I used to have a really big afro, my hair being bothered, and I wanted it to also be accessible because going to the club is expensive. I was so happy to finally be able to DJ like in a gay club, but my friends couldn't afford to come see me because it's expensive. And so, I made it sliding scale. So it's like, hey, if you don't got it, it's okay. There's, a white like bisexual femme that's going to pay $30 to come in so that you can come in. So it was really cool to have that. And also another big accessibility point in my city is Jacksonville is very, very hard to get around if you don't have a car. So we created a ride share system. So folks who are on certain parts of town were able to pick up other people to come to the party as well. And it was very, very successful. So many of like white allies stepped up and actually helped sustain Duval Folks, and also was a safe space. Like I said, people came and it was like, the straight boys were cheering on the gay boys had the Black femmes on stage, the Black femmes were hyping up the trans folks, and it just has been so beautiful and just so amazing to see like this community really accept it and really foster it and create that like ecosystem of care in a club setting. It's been amazing. And so, I really try to also center each Duval Folks around a theme. So I did like Act Up on HIV. We did honoring like our transcestors. We've done celebrating, Black femmes, celebrating Black men. And so hopefully this month, spoiler alert, if I can get it together, we're going to have Duval Folks Mi Gente. And so honoring our land and our people in November. And so I'm really just happy that I just honor myself that I was brave enough to, have this space and to like have my community be here and be behind me. And it's just been beautiful to be able to have it here.
Wow.
Y'all, we are in the midst of some great people doing some dope work. So make sure you check them all out. I'm sure they'll all feel free to like drop your like social media, your tags, your websites, anything, drop in the chat so people can follow up, really get connected to all this amazing stuff you're doing. Thank you all. So next we're going to go to our next question. So in like what ways do you think that other people in the LGBTQ plus community can show up for trans folks, for Black trans folks, for Indigenous trans folks? So like in what ways do you see them better showing up for us when we need it? And we can start with Agostria.
Yeah, I would say donating directly to Black trans femmes. Too often, like major, large, you know, corporation kind of like campaign projects, kind of like HR, you know, the Human Rights Campaign or GLAAD. Typically, kind of the work that they do doesn't really center Black trans women. And so too often Black trans women, we never see like get resources from them or anything. And so what I say is like the most impactful, effective way to actually like help our community is actually investing solely in our community. If that's giving money directly to Black trans femmes, if that's, you know, showing support, volunteering, or donating money if you can to trans run organizations led by Black trans women for Black trans women. That, you know, like the Okra Project or the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. I would say that's like a really good, impactful way. Another thing I would say, if you are a person of privilege, I would say, you know, typically they say like in the past, it's like, oh, you know, like help the marginalized people get in the room. And I'm like, fuck that. Like, get us in the room, then get me a seat at the table, and then give me a mic. Just sit there and be able to articulate and speak for myself. Because baby girl, it ain't good enough no more to be in the room. It ain't good enough to just be sitting at a table, you know, if your voice isn't actually heard. And so I'm saying allow Black trans femmes to, you know, speak for themselves, articulate for themselves what we need, donate directly to us, volunteer directly for us, you know, invest in leadership and programming led by Black trans femmes for Black trans femmes. So yeah, I think that would be the best thing. Yeah, like actually showing up in a better sense for us and dismantling, you know, your privilege and like the structures of oppression that we experience, and helping us, like giving us like a true helping hand.
Period. Absolutely. Thank
You
you,
eat it.
Agostria. Giella, you want to follow up that?
Yes, all of that.
Yeah.
I think that's what, you know, what I was saying earlier, like representation, seat at the table. It's frustrating, you know, when I have so much, you know, quoting Kendrick Lamar, royalty inside my DNA, where my ancestors made that table that you sitting at. My ancestors put them nails in that table.
Mm-hmm.
Ancestors made the land that you on where that table is at. And so it's frustrating that like we have to continuously fight to be there. When we created all of this, you know, this whole thing was created by slavery. This whole thing was created by free labor.
Yeah.
And so even for folks who do work like in nonprofit settings, you know, I continuously, you know, push back at my nonprofit. I'm like, okay, so how much are we going to pay these trans youth that we want to sit on a panel? How much are we going to pay this graphic artist that is doing speaking up in your nonprofits and being like, okay, we need to be paying Black and brown trans folks to be talking at these panels or to be a part of these little advisory councils. Like, I'm tired of having all this free labor for people, because this organization would not exist without them. This organization would not exist without their stories. This organization would not exist without that deliverable. And so we need to be paying them, especially when they can look up our records and we a $2.5 million nonprofit. Y'all buying books and stuff. You know, recorded, but I'll say this to my CEO. We having these conversations right now. It's like we need to be paying them. Like, you know, y'all quick to get them on a board, but then you're not quick to get them their check. And for me, I understand that because I also am a working artist as well. You know, Jasmine does pay, but Giella is the one that hustles out here and pays more of the bills. And So I know what it's like to have to hustle and to get, you know, that coin and get that money. And we need to be paying our people. And when you are sitting in a space where you can like get people money, we need to reach back. You know, that's how we can unify, is by making sure when we're in those positions of power, we are bringing people from the margins to the center. And we always
Yeah.
have that in the forefront of our minds. And that's how we can show up for LGBT communities and contributing to mutual aid. Like, we love to get to Glisten, we love to get to Trevor Project. Like, go
Right.
to your community, find like folks that are doing grassroots work, and finding trans people in your community that you can directly give money to, that might need a bed, or that might need a couch, or that might need some dishes, or that might need this. Like, we love supporting 501s. We do love, you know, we do love that. But also, if you can directly impact someone in your community, then do that, you know? That's how you can really show up in a meaningful way, is giving it directly to them.
Right. And if you want to create change and you want to actually like help people, that's the most impactful way to actually do it. You know, investing in these orgs in our backyards. Like, there's no reason in going to these $1 million, you know, they're essentially kind of like $1 million industries, kind of like, there's no reason to go to them where we have like organizations that are like grassroots, literally in our backyard, in our local communities. So investing in those directly.
Yeah. And
I
also,
have a question.
you were saying,
I have a question.
oh,
And the only reason I'm asking is because of what we're talking about. Ariel and Nicole, y'all have been like really, really quiet. And this panel is, we're trying to begin the unification. Can y'all let us know what y'all think? Because y'all are very, very quiet. The only person that's been speaking is Alex. And so, could you please let us know what you're thinking?
Yeah, of course. Honestly, I love everything that everyone's been saying, and I feel like it's been very powerful because, you know, of course, I do not identify as a person of color, so I feel like sitting back and truly listening to the experiences that everyone's been through and basically how it shaped all of your perceptions of just your everyday, you know, walks of life has really been like illuminating, and it's definitely changed like my perspective of how I view things because, you know, I walk into somewhere, I don't have the thoughts of, well, are people going to judge me based on this or this? You know, I'm less scared because of my, you know, I'm white presenting. But so hearing all of these things, you know, it breaks my heart, number one. But number two, it's also empowering to hear how, you know, everyone stayed so strong through it all. And I feel like that's just something that deserves like a round of applause because it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, and I just wanted to say, like it's so inspiring to hear all of your stories, and like to hear the difficulties that you all have to go through is frustrating for me as someone who's white and who's cisgender. So I can't imagine how you all feel. So it's definitely inspiring to hear you all, and I'm trying to definitely take it all in. Look, I got on my notes over here. So yeah.
Thank you both. Next we can move on to our last question, our last pre-written question, that is. So this one just kind of like, I want you all to tell us a little bit about some advice or words of inspiration, affirmation for like younger and future cutie POC. So like what is your little gem to share with the future? And we can start off with Regina.
Well, first and foremost, I live in my skin. So there was no other way for me to start off. Okay. I have lived in this state of ostracism and being made to feel less than and being made to work harder. I've always excelled in my jobs. Every job that I've had, I've excelled to manager or general manager or so forth and so on. but it's always been 3 or 4 times as hard as anybody else. See, I have to work harder, you know, because I'm the transgender woman in the group or the group. Now, mind you, my work ethic speaks for itself, but I still have to go far and beyond. I simply do what I have to do to get where I need to get. But what is not understood is I want us all to be in the same space, especially because of the reason being that in the end, we're gonna be in the same space. The place where we're trying to get is the place you're going to be left not knowing that the African American community needed to get there, okay? Because the legislation and the, you know, the politicians are saying transgender. They're not saying of color, they're saying transgender. With the things that they are trying to strip from us. Transgenders that go to prison, no protection. Transgenders that go for medical care. You can deny them if you feel like it. See, it doesn't say if you're Black, white, Asian, and so forth and so on. So this is, we have to realize we're here. And as far as me, myself personally, I've never not wanted my counterparts to be with me where I am. And I ask my counterparts to feel the same way. Because we need to be uplifted in the same way. We don't walk off and leave anyone standing because we want everybody to be on that same area. We want everybody to be on the same stepping stone. And that's what's most important, unification. That's it.
Thank you so much, Regina. So next, Gostria, if you want to share a little bit of like advice or words of inspiration for younger and future Cutie Park.
Yes, you know, I gotta say, give a few snaps and say, "Pewy," to Miss Regina about unity. That is so exceptionally important. For me personally, what I think, as I would give advice, is say, you have to know where we come from to know where we're going. Knowing your history and how crucial that is, and our, you know, the development and the furthering of our community and liberation for queer and trans people of color. That's exceptionally important. I'd also say to young QTPOC folks who are young activists to make sure that everyone in our community has a seat at the table. Too often, I think, even within marginalized communities, is that we tend to exclude people, sometimes on purpose or on accident, but just making sure that all folks are at the table and all folks actually have a mic to actually be heard. I say that, yeah, I think that's the most important thing, primarily making sure everyone's voices are heard, and everyone, and I mean everyone in our community, deserves to be able to have their voice heard. Their life matters just as much as ours do. And how do we further ourselves as a community while we're perpetuating the same bullshit that we've experienced through society? So yeah, ending that cycle and making sure that you're actually reaching out to other members of our community and uplifting their voices.
Thank you, Giella.
Yes, to both of them. I think something for me that I have to even constantly tell myself, but also give this advice to other people, it's just like decolonizing like what we think is a win, or decolonizing like what we think is like like labor that we've done. Like we're more than just like a productivity, you know. We might not see freedom in our lifetime, but we're working towards it. And I think indigenous practice tells us that sometimes some things that we do is for 7 generations before. You know, it might be something small, but it might be for them. It might not be for now. And just realizing that every single time we put in, we might not get something back, but that's okay because we still put in that work, and that work should still be celebrated. Because it is hard when we have infrastructures that are in place, like white supremacy and patriarchy and transphobia, homophobia, all the isms. The person who is supposed to be, you know, the quote unquote president of the United States is telling, you know, all this like rhetoric of causing violence, you know, and then we have systems in place, active white supremacist things in place like the Senate, you know, where people can serve until the end of their life. And so we do have a lot of things that are working against us. And so just remembering that, again, we might not see freedom in our lifetime, but it might happen in our lifetime, you know, and being okay with that. But continuously pushing back, continuously agitating, organizing, and protesting, because that is what makes change. Protesting, power to people is what makes change, not this government bullshit. Because
Amen.
if we historically think about how things have changed, it's because protests have happened. Because, you know, we videotaped, you know, Black people being attacked by dogs and by water and like that going on TV, and folks in the South being like, oh my gosh, this is like what's happening, you know? Looting, like when we fuck shit up, that's when people want to pay attention to us, you know? Thankfully now we're able to capture those things in real life, but you know, unfortunately there is a lot of people who didn't get that video, you know, that didn't get any of that. And so just remembering that there is always work to do and everyone has a different place. Sometimes your place isn't on the front lines. Sometimes your place isn't, you know, creating an organization. Sometimes your place is just, you know, maybe doing video work or creating a flyer, or, you know, we need organizers, people to take notes. You know, there's so many like places and there's so many things to do within movement work, and it's just finding your place, you know, of like where that is, and just know that it is contributing. But again, you might not see that, and that's okay, because we might not see that freedom in our lifetime, but it's happening.
Oh, it's definitely happening. Yes, all to that. Wow, baby.
G, I love you. Thank you so much.
I love you. No,
I love me some GL.
And I love everybody on this panel. I just want you to know unification is key. And that's just
Yeah.
that's the only way to put
your word, remain.
Remain.
Remain. Remain.
And we can't go to this, you know, we can't sway off the goal. We have to stay focused and stay.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you all for being here tonight and sharing all of your amazing words. I know I saw a lot of people in the chat throughout the whole conversation, you know, vibing with what you're saying, resonating, hearing you, seeing you, amplifying you. Very, very beautiful. Thank you all so much. So that was the end of our pre-scripted questions. Because of time, we did plan to have like a few-minute break here, but because of time, we're just not going to be able to do that. But I'm going to hold this slide here for a second. So on the left hand, if you want to scan that QR code, go ahead and sign in if you didn't get to. And on the right-hand side, there's a QR code to join our group me if you want to stay up to date with all things Pride Student Union. And in the middle is the hashtag for our social media if you want to follow us. So I'll leave this here for a second. And then after this, we're going to go into the audience Q&A portion. So if you really had something you wanted to ask a specific person or address the whole panel, this is the time to do that. We'll do that for about 15-ish minutes, depending on how many questions we get. And then we'll do a quick wrap up. And Ariel is going to be moderating our Q&A session.
Hi, everyone. So the way this is going to work, you could either send something in the chat and I can call on you to turn on your mic. If you don't want to speak out loud, I could just read your question out. One note is please specify who your question's towards. So if it's for a specific panelist, just let us know. And if not, just like say it's for everybody. Also, you can use the raise hand function and I'll just call on you and you could turn on your mic and speak. So many options, whatever works best for you. Okay, so I see one person raising their hand. Devin?
Hi, I just wanted to say I loved this panel. I'm a alumni of UF and friends with Ellie Gostria here, and I just was blown away by this programming, like light years ahead of what PSU was doing when I was there. So wanted to say that. But also I kind of wanted to ask for the full panel, do you all have a favorite part of your queerness or a favorite part of community? Because I feel oftentimes a lot of these things tend to be framed about trauma that community has gone through, and we don't always talk about how beautiful and amazing these communities can be and how they are actually quite incredible for a very happy life despite living in some pretty oppressive circumstances. So I just wanted to know what you all thought about your favorite part of being queer and or non-binary and really troubling these ideas of what heteronormativity and straightness is.
So we'll start with Regina, if you'd like to go first.
My favorite part is all of the parts. That's first and foremost because of the simple fact that I'm transgender. I learned when I came into the world of advocacy, which was 2 years ago, I learned about all the different facets of our community. And I accepted it, in which is what my goal is for everyone in each community. I accepted non-binary. I accepted gender fluid. I accepted transgender, which is what I represent myself as. However, there was a time I didn't. My pronouns were she and her, and still is. My pronouns were woman. When this came about, the visibility is when I changed that and became transgender woman. But I became that honestly because my community was hurting. My community needed me. So I unified with my community because we blended in where I come from and my background. You know, we blended in because you had to be one or the other. I'm 48 years old. So you had to be one or the other, okay? So the thing you have to understand is I opened my entire heart to my community and I accepted what was going on in the here and the now. And being that my particular stance, which is African American, were receiving so much hatred, so much ostracization, so much, making us feel less than, I had to take that step. I had to, open up and say, okay, I am transgender. I had to grab my sisters and brothers' hands and say, we're going to stay here together. Whether it was non-binary, whether it was gender fluid, whether it was androgynous, we had to stand here together. So the favorite part for me is still, and I'm always say and always come back to, unity. I'm gonna be there for you, and I keep going down and go back to go to the next page, because at the end of the day, that's where we stand, being together.
Okay, and now Gostria, if you'd like to answer, please.
Yes, wow, that's beautiful. I really love this question. The person that asked it is actually a really good friend of mine. I love Devin so much. I don't know if she's still on, but to answer the question, for me, one thing I really love about my queerness is the significance of chosen family, specifically when you don't have affirming family that are supportive of you for being queer and trans. And so for me, like, my life dramatically changed. I never really had like an actual chosen family until college. Meeting, my good friend Michael and my good friend Damien and Caputo and Hiram and Steve, and I don't know, they're all alums of the University of Florida, but it was just so meaningful for me having that community that I'd never had before. I'd never had a chosen family before, and my own family wasn't affirming to me, whatsoever. So I didn't have a relationship with them. So I don't know, it's like this big gap in my life that I didn't realize was there really, or the significance of that like gap, until I actually had a chosen family and that really tight, community that, it's friendship essentially, but it's so much more than that. I consider them my family. And just the beautifulness of chosen family. I think like cishet people don't get to ever experience anything like this to this level essentially. And so it's all about chosen family for me, the significance within our community, and just those really, really tight friendships. That's what is so beautiful to me about being queer.
All right, Giella, would you like to close out for us?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was gonna say too. Chosen family, and the just the expansion of language as well. That was something that was huge for me when I entered like queer spaces and realized that I was queer. Was just getting like the affirmation of a lot of what I was experiencing. Being Black and being like questioning like my gender and questioning like my sexuality. And realizing that like I wasn't alone in that, and that I was experiencing microaggressions and oppression, but it was just beautiful to just like know that like there was words out there to explain what I was feeling, and it just kind of like helped a lot with my imposter syndrome, but also just like having community with like Black friends, or having community with like Hispanic like gay folks, and just being able to like laugh about stuff that we like get, like, and it's like we have our own like kind of code that people don't get.
They just yeah.
Yes, they don't get it at all, and I love that. I love that about this, is that it does intersect with like race, and it does intersect with gender and sexuality, and so just like being able to laugh about certain stuff, or to cry about certain stuff, or to bond over certain things, within our queerness and within like our race. So yeah, that's just my favorite thing.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. We have time for one more quick question because we do have to wrap up soon. So I see Michael is raising their hand. If you'd like to go on, Mike.
hey, oh my gosh, I was really hoping you would pick me. Thank you for that. only time for one more. But I just want to
the best one.
I want to first off reiterate what Devin said. I think all these three panelists are awesome. Regina, you've been giving me life this entire panel. Like, you are just everything. And
oh my God.
Yella,
Hi. I wanted to say hi. I didn't know you were on here too, Michael. I'll shut up. Also, Regina's
Okay, this is
also
such a reunion.
so much fucking life right now too. Okay, I'll shut up. Okay, bye.
yeah, all three panelists, hi Devin. All three panelists are amazing. Jill, you're awesome. Gostria, you're also amazing. You guys have been giving great this insight to this entire thing. And I kind of wanted to ask, coming from, I'm also a UF alum, and when I first moved to Gainesville was kind of my first time being in a smaller town, like maybe like a medium-sized city or a smaller city, as a queer person. And you really get to see the difference. I'm originally from New York, so you initially get to see like the differences between activism, like queer activism and grassroots activism on a different scale. And I think a lot of times people will think that if it's a small city, like nothing is going on, and there's not as much things happening on the ground, which I like very quickly was picking up on that is completely not the case. And there are people like our three panelists are here that are doing amazing work like on the ground. And I know that Jacksonville, where Giella is also like from, is also sort of like a smaller scene. So I kind of wanted to ask the panelists what they feel is like their favorite part about being an activist in like kind of a smaller queer scene. Are there difficulties with that as opposed to being in a bigger city, or like how do you think like your experience with like being in that sort of space is?
I want to answer that first. And the reason I want to answer that is, Michael, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia when I was 17 years of age. So I grew up in a big city. I was able to grow and learn and experience a lot of differences other than my little small Gainesville, Florida country town. But when I came back home, I wanted my town, my city, to experience what I experienced. I wanted them to experience being able to be accepted. I wanted them to experience unification, because Atlanta showed me that it was a whole different world. It showed me that things, it's so much separation here.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed me that there could be the unification. It could be, and you just have to put yourself in the position. You have to make the moves. And being that I grew up in Atlanta, I have the connections. I have the people that I can reach out to. So therefore, it's been amazing, because I can take, my little small country town experiences and where I grew up as a grown woman in Atlanta, Georgia, and put them together, and we mesh. And so that's why I can be powerful in my little small community, because I've been in a big community. And I know what it is to unify. And I know what it takes. And that's why that's my message over everything. Numbers is everything. And if we're together, we're going to succeed. There's no way around it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to Gostria. If you'd like to answer, please.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm an ACR. I don't know if y'all still use that term, the younger generation, but Electric County resident. I'm from Gainesville, born and raised. So for me personally, I can't really necessarily say, I bet, what it's like in a larger city with organizing, but I can say, I think one of the beautiful things about Gainesville specifically is that there's like this intimateness It's close, it's tighter knit, everyone knows everyone, and I think it's maybe like a little easier to get involved with organizing or being a part of a community collective rather than like in a larger city maybe. So Gainesville just has this really beautiful thing of like, I don't know, like the intimacy, the connection that you get that you wouldn't get, I don't think, in a larger city. So for me, it's all about that. But one thing I wanted to say is that I love that the two people that asked questions were my best friends. So shout out to Caputo, shout out to Devin. I love y'all. Thank you for the amazing questions.
Love you.
Love you. All right, and last but not least, Giella, would you like to close us out, please?
Yeah, so I think similarly to, I only grew up in Jacksonville, but I know for me, just like I have traveled a lot, so I do like organize in other cities, and I do like shows and stuff. And I think for me, the thing about Jacksonville is that you can be a little bit more imaginative here. Anything that you do is fresh, and anything that you do here is like, oh my God, like you're doing something so cool. And I think that was something that came into play when I created Duval Folks, is because there's queer parties happening, all over the United States, but, it just didn't happen in Jacksonville. And I think it just has a lot to do with like being in the South, and there is like, downfall is there is a lot of pushback, from like the city. It's really hard to like get, permits and things when you want to do fun, big stuff. A lot of people in the city don't think big. So you're constantly the one like having to do the big thinking. But again, when you are successful in doing it, then the community is impacted in such a huge way. So I think, again, there's pros and cons to it, to both.
Thank you so much. So unfortunately, we do have to end this event. It's been such a lovely time. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to send a link into the chat box. If everyone could please fill that out. It's just a survey of what you thought about the meeting, an event, and how you enjoyed it. And yeah, Alex, if you want to take over.
Yeah, so I just want to give another big round of snaps to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, sharing all of your excellent words. So glad you could exist in this space with us. Really love that you're here. So if you all could scan this QR code or click on the link that Ariel is going to drop in the chat, give us some feedback so we can continue creating content that you all love. And so next, I'm going to have Julie give another announcement for an upcoming PSU event.
Yes, hello everyone. I just want to continue to praise. It was a wonderful event, very excellent panelists. I'm very happy that y'all made it out and that everybody was able to attend. Wonderful job. And again, wonderful work that you are all doing. Thank you so much. But yeah, so our next UBM is going to be October 26th, starting at 7, and it's going to be on Zoom. It's going to kind of touch on a few of the stuff that was discussed today. So, if you're interested in kind of continuing the sort of conversation, talking about intersectionality and the different work that we can do in terms of like unifying and bringing all of our collective identities together, come out to the event. It's going to be a really fun, really good discussion time. So yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Julie. And so this is the last slide that we have. So this QR code is for our link tree. So if you scan that, we have a list of links, of resources, our social media, different ways to get connected to Pride Student Union. And then we also have our social media down at the bottom and our email. So if you have any questions, want to follow up, get connected, talk some more, feel free to send us an email. And I think that's all I have for everyone tonight. Again, thank you so much for everyone for participating. Thank you again to our panelists for being here. And also, Miriam was wondering if she could get a picture of everybody for our social media. So if you could turn on your cameras, if you feel comfy being shared on our social media, that'd be great. Miriam, do you want the slide
Can
up?
you keep the slide down, please?
Yeah. Got you.
Alrighty, y'all. So is everybody who's like comfy being in a picture like good? Everybody on the screen.
Okay.
If you don't want your name in the picture, you can reach out to us on Instagram like tonight, and I can just like blur your name out if that's like any form of an issue. But when everybody's ready, I'm just gonna count down from 3. Alrighty. Alrighty. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everybody. Wait, actually, before I say that, let me make sure the picture looks good. Oh, that's so cute. It'll be on our social media, y'all. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Yes, right. Good night, everyone.
You. Regina, if you can email me and we could talk about getting the recording of this event so we can post it, that'd be great.
Okay, most definitely. I got you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Love you all.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye, everyone. Thank you again.
Bye, y'all. Have a good night.
One.
Thank you.
Regina, did you need something? Or are you just trying to?
I'm just sending the thing to you, Alex.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's still recording if you don't mind turning it on.
Oh, yes. Hold on.